some downtime at a time when it's probably really, really hectic at your house. Maybe the kids aren't up yet, so maybe that's a good thing, depending on what time it is in your time zone. I wanted to say something this morning, or actually read something to you that I saw on Facebook yesterday. And I don't do that very often, but this one kind of caught me and brought back a lot of memories, and actually kind of hit home to me yesterday, because our youngest daughter that we adopted when she was we got her when she was 5 months old, has Down syndrome, and she's 35 years old now. And she lives with us, and she is, well, pure joy. I don't know how else to say it. But being cooped up with her for the last month has really started to show on this incredible young woman who is the most kind, patient, loving, empathetic, compassionate human being I've ever known in my life. And things are really starting to get to her. And I started thinking about, well, Irene, how abrupt have you been with her? How much have you told her just go away? How much have you said, not now, not now, not now, I'm working? And how much have you said those kinds of things to her? And she's not really understand probably the whole dynamics of all of that and the why of it. She just knows that something's not right with mama, and with daddy too, probably. So when I saw this, it kind of hit home to me. And I did exactly last night what it said I ought to do. So this was from somebody called Crunchy Mama. I don't know who Crunchy Mama is, but because it was on public Facebook, I'm taking the liberty to share with you what she wrote. If you're having an especially tough day with your kids, let them know. As you tuck them into bed, say, today was rough. We will try again tomorrow. Kiss them goodnight, remind them of your endless love, and give your heart a rest, because not every day can be easy, and we will have days that wear on us. Be gentle to yourself, be gentle to your children, and just try again tomorrow. After I went in and talked with her last night when she was going to bed, and I told her that, I tried to understand and that I was sorry if I wasn't being a good mama to her, that I wanted to be a better mama tomorrow. This morning, she came in, and the first thing she did, instead of going to the kitchen to get something to eat like she usually does, she came over to me and gave me a big hug and said, love you, mama. Well, made my world go round and round again, and just showed me how easy it is for us to oftentimes lose sight of what's really important, but not recognizing how we are reacting to what's going on around us. And so I just wanted to share that with you this morning, first thing. We had some really, 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 really good questions come in last week. And so many of them were kind of in the same vein. And so kind of pared them down to three basic questions. Well, four at the end, I'll explain something to you. But I think we're going to go right into the questions and then talk about some of these things as much as we can on a general national level, and for those things that can be maybe more personal to each of you in your own way. So Sean is with us again this morning, our webmaster and IT guru, and there's our first question. Can the passion to support caregivers ever recede? No, I don't think it can. I think that caregivers, being a caregiver, and particularly in the foster care realm, but in any realm, I was a caregiver for my mother for years. She had a colostomy. I had to change several times a day. I mean, It was hard, but I wouldn't trade those years for anything. But I needed support. I needed cheerleaders. I needed people to say, you know, Irene, you can keep doing this. I'll learn how to do what you do so you can have a day. I'll do those things if that's what it's going to take. My brother was a champion to say, you know, I can't do that part, Irene. I can't go down there and make those kind of changes for her, but I can support you in doing that. Every caregiver needs support because it's hard. Oftentimes it's 24/7 caregiving, and it's really difficult. So no, we can't give up on our caregivers. We have to keep being champions because somebody has to be. Caregivers get so tired and sometimes become where they feel so alone and that the weight of the world is on them only. Well, I think that because the caregivers are so important, we've got to be their champions. We've got to keep saying to them, what can we do? How can we do it? What do we need to do to make things better for you? Last week, I briefly mentioned motivation and how when we're recruiting families, we look at motivation very quickly in the process and then revisit that through the process and then into the time when they actually have been licensed and are fostering. Because motivations can be really, really strong and then they can start to wither because life gets so difficult. And during that time last week, I mentioned that my motivational story and that I might share it. And so I think that I will do that this morning. This is a very personal story, one that I've rarely spoken about in groups of people. But it's my story, and so I understand it. And I hope if I tell it to you, then you will be able to relate how you've led your life, what decisions you've made throughout your life that maybe were based on that first true motivation. So, you know, I went to college at 17. I was young, had every intention of becoming a person in the medical field, pre-med major. And in less than a month in college, I met this really handsome sailor who was at the Naval Air Station in the town where I was going to college. And like, long story short, that summer in July 2nd, we got married. This July 2nd, that will be 54 years ago. So I was young and dumb in many ways, but I was sure smart when it came to picking the right man to live my life with and to have my family with. We both talked about wanting to have a large family. He came from a large family. I have one brother. I always wanted more siblings. And so that was our plan. Well, that plan wasn't working out. And so a couple of 3 years later, we started doing all the medical things that people recommended and going to the doctors and getting the tests and doing the procedures and all of those things. And nothing was working. And I was a person who was raised in the church. I never missed church. As a teenager, I played the piano at our local country church. I lived out on a farm. And then I rode with a pastor to his second church in San Antonio and played the organ for that elderly congregation there. And I did that for years. Church was really, really important in my life. And I taught Sunday school. You know, I did all of those things. But I started feeling sorry for myself during this process and decided that, you know, God had turned his back on me, and I didn't know why, because I kept thinking, well, I've been trying my hardest. God, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I'm trying to live your life you want, but obviously it's It's not working. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So I stopped going to church. I didn't go to church for almost 6 weeks. Didn't do anything at church. Did not read my Bible. Just was having one big major pity party. And as I was walking by our fireplace one day, the mantle, my Bible was always just right there, handy on the mantle. And a voice said to me, Irene, you need to open that Bible. Well, I'm going to ignore that. Went on and did what I needed to do, and I was coming back through the living room to go to the kitchen, and there I'm walking by that mantle again. And the voice says to me, Irene, you must open your Bible. Okay, so I took it down and I opened it. I literally opened it. Random, completely, totally random. And I looked at those 2 pages, and all I saw basically was one verse. It looked this big to me. And it said, and he will take the barren woman and make her the happy mother of many children. Hallelujah, hallelujah. So the last verse in Psalm 113. I don't have words to describe what I felt in that moment or how I felt after that for hours and days, actually. The message was clear. I wasn't going to get my family the way most people did, right? There's no way. But I had God's promise that I was going to be the mother and a happy mother of many children. Our next step was to apply to an adoption agency to be adoptive parents. We were told it would take at least 2 years. 6 months later, we got this phone call. We've got this baby girl, may have some special needs. We don't know. Are you interested? Duh. Yeah, we were. That started our adventure. So we adopted our first daughter, and she's just so wonderful. She has a beautiful family. I have marvelous grandchildren. And I knew then that I don't think there's a way to love anybody any more than I love her. And she wasn't born of my body, but Lord knows she was born of my heart. And she was God's true gift to us. So about 3 years later, we decided that we would try to be foster parents. Went to a meeting that the county had, and went in there, and we were welcomed. And then pretty much the first thing that the 2 ladies leading it from the county said was, how many of you in here, there were maybe 20, 25 people in that room, how many of you in here have adopted children? Well, we raised our hand, and so did 2 other couples. Well, do you have any intention of adopting again? We all 3 couples raised our hands again. Yeah, at some point, we'd like to do that again. And we were forced to leave that meeting. Because back then, foster parents couldn't adopt. It was against the rules, at least in my state. And as I learned, as my advocacy work grew after that it was that way in many states. Well, as one of those other strange things could happen, I had bought and was operating a daycare center in that town. And one of the parents of children that I had in my care was a caseworker for Child Protective Services. And about a year after this meeting, when we were told we couldn't foster and to go home, she called and she said, Irene, have you and your husband ever thought about being foster parents? I said, oh yes, we went to a meeting a year ago and we're told to go home because foster parents are not allowed to adopt children. And so we could not become foster parents. And she just says the stupidest rule I've ever heard in my life. She said, I have 2 little boys that need a family, and they need a family today. Well, I'm at the daycare. My husband's at work, right? I'm like, what do you mean today? Well, if you and Bill will are serious about wanting to be foster parents, I'm going to bring these boys to you. Now, in today's world, would that happen? I hope not. Because I was like, you only know me here. You've never been to my home. You don't really know my husband at all, except maybe up there, see him fixing something once in a while. But you don't know us. You don't know how we live. You don't know who we are. But they were that desperate. So about an hour later, she brings these 2 little fellas, and about 16 months old. And we became instant foster parents after having had nobody visit our home, nobody do a real interview, nobody do a home study. It took 2 weeks for somebody to come out to our house and start the home study. We'd had those little fellas for 2 weeks. So when I look at how did my life really become what it became, was those events that put focus onto what did I need to be doing. Yes, I needed to be parenting these kids because it just brought such great joy, and even in the midst of all the sorrows. And it, though, showed me that there was a different part of me that I didn't know existed before that said, I'm going to stand up for these kids and their families. We got to make this right. Children should be put in with some people who are total strangers that nobody's even ever been to their house before, that I could just put those kids in my car and take them home with me. Did it work out? Sure. It worked well. In fact, the youngest of those 2 boys is our oldest son. Again, beautiful family, wonderful grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Our lives changed with each and every child that joined our family, whether they stayed through adoption or not. We had 127 children, so we couldn't adopt them all, right? And we adopted a total of 4 kids. So, I was so happy when we were able to buck the system and actually adopt our son, and then really start working within the child protection realm and the state legislature to change that rule that they had about foster parents not being able to adopt children. So motivation of what drives us is incredibly important. And what we often learn, I've found, and by talking with other caregivers as well, is what our original motivator was usually continues to be important to us. Sometimes the fire goes out, so it's just a spark left. But something that grew out of that becomes kind of the new motivator. And I think that makes sense because we all change as we grow older. We change as we have more experiences, more difficult experiences, more joy. Our perspective changes. And so we have to be able to change with it. But I've also heard and learned from many people that original motivator, whatever it was, is still there. That spark is still there and it hasn't gone away. It's just been enhanced oftentimes in many ways. So for me, looking at the motivators of people who are caregivers and what created that, were they forced into it because they're the only one there who could take care of mama? And what did that do and how does that sit? Or are they volunteers? people with all kinds of motivations and good hearts that want to help other families be safe and strong and well too. Regardless, we have to be there to support them, to be their cheerleaders, to help them through the really tough days. And I was thinking a little bit too late last night, there's a cartoon that I love. And if I can find it, it's kind of old. I'll share it next week. But excuse me, I do have lots of allergies. When I did find that one years ago, I used it in many presentations because it just speaks to me so. And it's a crane, a bird with a long neck, and you probably may have seen it. And there's this frog halfway into this crane's beak, and the frog's front legs are up and around and squeezing that crane's neck so that crane can't swallow him. And it's a standoff, a true standoff. And it's one of the best pictures I've ever seen that helped describe so many days and so many incidences in my life as a caregiver. And sometimes it was the kids that I felt that I was in that standoff with, and oftentimes I felt it was the system that I was in that standoff with. And I had to learn how to figure out how to prioritize what over what, right? And where to go to get help. Where were my cheerleaders? Where were those people who were trying to help me be the best I could be to meet the needs of the children in my family, and to be helpful to their parents as well, to work towards reunification, which I do truly believe needs to happen for as many families as possible. So that's kind of my answer to the compassion for caregivers ever recede. I don't think it can. And I think that it's important that there be folks out there who can see beyond themselves and want to work towards making the system better for everybody involved. That's certainly what I did after we retired from fostering after 27 years. I was a true advocate before that and got in myself a lot of trouble and blackballed a few times and some of those sorts of things, and placements withheld, okay, because I spoke out what I felt was right. But when I wasn't that foster parent anymore, and nobody could hold any of those things over me, then I became an even stronger advocate. And I think that as each of you, if you're already there and you're not fostering anymore, I mean, you got a wide open field to be an advocate, a stronger advocate. And for those of you that may be winding down, you've got some things you can think about doing once you're not fostering anymore, because you understand what all these folks are going through, and you've seen the pieces of the system that work and the pieces that don't, and you can speak up about that. Sean, can we have the second question? Okay, so this is the one that we kind of took a bunch of questions and put them into one. Given the pandemic, what's happening within the foster care system to utilize electronic means of communication, supervision, family time, training and support, court hearings, meetings, and that sort of thing. So those were a bunch of questions that came in. And certainly, as we know, the internet is being bombarded right now. In some countries, they're having to parcel out internet time. We know that FaceTime is being used a lot, Zoom, GoToMeeting. I mean, there's a jillion of them, right? And they're being maxed to their limits. I know that we use GoToMeeting quite a bit for our board meetings and our committee meetings and things like that here at NFPA. And we got an email saying, don't schedule anything on the hour, on the half hour. Schedule it 10 minutes after or 20 minutes after the hour, because the peak times are on the hour and the half hour, and you may not be able to get through. And that's what we were truly experiencing. Frustrating, but understandable given the times. And so we make adjustments on how we're going to be communicating with people. And yes, electronics are being used in all of those ways. So one question was, how's FaceTime going with bio parents and siblings? For many caregivers, or are you still being asked to do face-to-face? Well, quite frankly, for face-to-face meetings between children and their parents or their siblings, if they're not with their siblings, or even grandma and grandpa, are incredibly important. Probably one of the most important pieces of reunification, and certainly for well-being of all members of that family. The Children's Bureau just published an article in the Chronicle of Social Change, and if you don't get that, take a look at that. It's always very relevant, pertinent, important information for people who are advocating or working within the foster care systems. And an article came out written by Associate Commissioner Jerry Milner and his special assistant, David Kelly, that's really strong on a visitation and what we are trying to call now family time or something like that. It just sounds so much better than visitation. And the importance of that and the importance of it being in person. I was interviewed by a reporter from Hawaii a little over a week ago, I guess, and that article ran in Honolulu and across the islands just a couple of days ago. And a foster mom from there emailed me, and then so did a mom whose child was in the system. And she got my information off the bottom of the article. And so I had some communication with those folks yesterday and the day before about visitation. And you know, when you're looking at why is in person so important, it's not just about seeing somebody, but it's about being able to touch them, to smell them, to connect with them in ways that you can't when you're on the other side of a screen. And for little kids in particular, they don't understand if I'm in the front yard and you're in the front yard, but I have to stay 6 feet away from you. That makes no sense to me. That can bring back all the memories, the triggers of being taken away from my mama when it happened. And now my mama's there and I can't touch her. I can't let her hold me. I can't jump up and hug her. So there's these conflicting feelings about, do we break the rules, you know, and say people can be together for these visits? Or do we say, you know, there's good and bad about that too, so we need to do it electronically until the powers that be say it's safe to do it differently? There's no right answer. I just want you to know that there's really no right answer to any of this right now, because we haven't had time to figure out what the right answers might be. The same goes for recruiting and training foster parents. It almost goes back to the way I felt like when we were asked to take these kids. Oh my gosh, at least that caseworker saw me twice a day, right? When she left her children and picked her children up, she had some feel for how I worked with kids, how happy the children were, being in my care, that kind of thing. But they had no clue about who we were as a family. They had no clue about what we believed or if we were weird, you know, in some ways. I mean, they just didn't know those things. And so I know that there are, you know, there's a lot of recruitment going on electronically now. The application processes, orientation meetings, pre-service trainings are going on that way. And that, it scares me. So at the point where human contact does have to happen, where there are people who can go into that home and visit, who can sit in the same room with those folks and ask questions and watch their body language and all of those things as they get the answers, is incredibly important. But we can't, I can understand too, we can't put the whole process off because we've got to have more families. We never seem to have enough. So the FaceTime with parents is important. How we use electronics to recruit and train and then support caregivers is huge. I already mentioned that our association and everybody that we work with nationally and in our states are using electronic communication for pretty much everything. And we're learning how to do that with each new encounter and how to get better at that as well. The question one was about court hearings and our court hearings being continued. And as we understand it, in some jurisdictions they are, and they are being handled through some kind of electronic means. And the few I've heard of, it's over the phone, like a regular conference call, and others where they can actually see each other in the process and continuing to do that. And we know that electronically adoptions are happening now because we've got families posting those on Facebook a lot, especially on the foster adoptive parent groups, where they're announcing their adoptions via an electronic meeting with a judge. So yes, electronics are important. I think we're going to be using them a whole lot more in the future. I do believe the new norm is going to include a lot more of that. And probably a lot of things we haven't even thought about yet, but that are there in somebody's mind that's going to make this happen. Let's see. Checking in with children by the caseworkers, certainly during this time of pandemic, is also being done electronically. And the states and counties are supposed to be following the federal guidelines, at least, of how often they have to do that. So if you're not getting a call or a FaceTime or something with you and with your children that are there in foster care, you should be. So if not, try to figure out who should be doing that and why it's not happening, because it's really important for you to have an opportunity to talk about what's happening in your family, get help with the things that you might need some help with, just be heard that you're not alone in this. And for those kids to have the opportunity to talk to somebody that hopefully they can trust and get good information about their family, what's happening with their parents, because they're feeling a lot of fear for the future in probably more ways than you and I are. Okay, Sean, let's go to question number 3. Okay, I'm not seeing a question, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk about that. Excuse me one more minute. This runny nose. There we go. So what can we do virtually to celebrate National Foster Care Month in May? I was so glad when I saw this question because it's an important one. And I don't know if you know or not, but the National Foster Parent Association is one of the partners that works with the Children's Bureau and numerous other organizations that plan activities for May each year. And as soon as the May is over in June, we'll have the first meeting to start planning National Foster Care Month for the next year. We'll start thinking about what should the theme be. We'll be thinking about what materials do we need? What do we need to have available to individuals, states, counties, associations, that sort of thing that they can utilize in their locales, in their communities to spread the word. And so I found, let me see if I can find it right quick. I found a webinar this morning announced by the Center for States. And the Center for States is a group that is federally funded. And it is to really be looking at ways to improve the foster care system. And they're going to have a webinar in May, I think it's May 28th, yes, May 28th, called Collaborating with Courts to Promote Foster Care as a Support to Families, Not a Substitute for Parents. So what's significant about that title? Well, the theme of National Foster Care Month this year, as it was last year, is foster care serves as a support to families, not a substitute for parents. So this will be an important webinar. There will be many more during the month of May put on by many organizations. So, watch the information that you get from NFPA and the other groups that you might be a part of, because when we learn about these things, we will share them with you on our website or through social media, through our e-newsletter, that sort of thing. We'll try to provide that so that you can attend the ones that you feel are being helpful to you. There's a National Foster Care Month website that is very important that you can go to. There is a toolkit available for states and counties and local communities to utilize. So use that. Go Google your National Foster Care Month, and you will be amazed at the amount of information you will find. You will find printed stories, you will find videos of families, you will find lots of data and information. So do your best to do that as well. So I'm seeing that I've really gone over my time today, and I must apologize to you for that, because I always intended to keep these at 20 minutes at max, and here I think I'm at 30. But one of the other questions that did come in yesterday, and I'm just going to close with this for you, is will I pop up as on live Facebook, in case you forget? So here's the answer from Sean. I'm going to let you know, because I don't know the answers to these kind of mechanical or electronic things. When Coffee for Caregivers goes to a live format, which we're recorded right now, you will receive Facebook notifications when we go live. For the time being, these conversations are pre-recorded and posted to our Facebook feed and website at nfpaonline.org/coffee at 10 a.m. Central on Tuesdays. So that said, I'm sorry I ran long today. I won't try to be as long-winded next time, I promise. Thank you for participating again. And I hope you have a really, really good day.